I'm Mike Brennan. I happen to be a banker during the day with BB&T, but one of the real joys in my life has been as one of the co-chairs of TransformSC for a number of years. I'd like to welcome you to the 6th annual TransformSC Conference, and today we're going to be talking about project-based learning and personalized learning. As most of you know, the TransformSC is a coalition of business leaders, educators, students, parents, policymakers that are transforming K through 12 public education, that every student graduates with the skills and characteristics listed on our profile of the graduate. We've expanded this year and we're still growing. We now have 67 schools in 28 districts, as well as 7 whole districts working to change policies and practices in the network. I am excited to announce 2 new schools that are joining our network. Anderson Mill Elementary School in Spartanburg 6 and the Sumter Career Technology Center in Sumter County. If those folks from those schools would please stand up, we'd like to welcome you. Several more schools are in the process of completing the application process, so we expect to announce those very soon. And if you're not a part of TransformSC, we encourage you to stop at the registration desk and you can get some information as to how you can begin that process. We plan to be active today through social media. You'll see at your tables is a tent card with all the appropriate Twitter and maybe Instagram. I'm not sure what all is on there, but anyway, so we'll be very active on social media today. I also want to thank our sponsors for today. They include ACT, AT&T, BB&T, Boeing, Nephron, Midlands Technical College, South Carolina ETV, South Carolina Administrators Association, the South Carolina School Boards Association, and Total Comfort Solutions. Finally, I want to thank Emily Eckert from Next and Pruitt Strategies, the TransformSC staff, and both Susie Shannon and Ed Sellers from the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness for all their support behind the scenes and the work necessary to make today possible. So thank you to the staff. Are there any legislators or legislative staff in attendance today? I haven't seen any, but they're budgeting. That's right. Today's budget day, isn't it? I forgot about that. Well, let's go ahead and get started. My first responsibility is to introduce our keynote speaker, and I have this wonderful bio on him, but Tom and I were talking beforehand, and I said, you know, I can read all this stuff. It says you're wonderful and so on and so forth, but I said, give me something interesting. Well, I learned that early in his career, he was a coal miner in West Virginia, southern Pennsylvania. He did that for a few years, and then he went into retail, ended up starting a company or being part of a company that was eventually sold, I believe, to Kmart. And then lo and behold, Tom ends up in Seattle as a superintendent of a school district. Now this guy doesn't have a degree in education, doesn't have a PhD in education, had never worked in a school prior to this with the exception of going to school. And he told me that the first day on the job, the teachers went on strike. Now, he didn't tell me if it was because of pay or there was already a strike schedule, but I think he led me to believe they went on strike because who's this superintendent with no experience in education? What are we doing with a superintendent who's a business guy? So I thought it would be more fun to share that. But Tom is the CEO of Getting Smart, and he does have one of his associates with us today. Is it Janice? Janice happens to live just in Elgin, so she's here in South Carolina with us. So it's my pleasure to bring to you Tom Vander Ark.
Thank you,
That
Mike.
was a little more fun, wasn't it?
Morning. I want to start with a poem by a Southern poet, Rita Dove. Open it, go ahead, it won't bite. Well, maybe a little, more a nip, a tingle. It's pleasurable, really. You see it opens, it keeps on opening. You may fall in. Sure, it's hard getting started. Remember learning to use knife and fork? Dig in, you'll never reach the bottom. It's not like the end of the world. It's just the world as you think you know it. I wanted to start with the words of Rita Dove because it's a great reminder of how important literacy is. I'm going to talk about project-based learning today, but I wanted to start by celebrating the important work that teachers do introducing kids to basic literacy and how literacy changes lives. I love the end of this poem. It's not the end of the world, it's just the world as you think you know it. And for so many of us, books have really opened up our sense of possibility, our sense of self. So we're going to explore that today. We're going to spend an hour together going through these three questions of what's happening, what does it mean, and how to prepare. In some respects, this is a model for a conversation that you could have at your school with your PTA or that you could have at your Rotary. I did this with my local Rotary Club last week. You may want to do this with your Chamber of Commerce. But because so many things are changing, it seems like a really good chance to have a community conversation about what's happening, what does it mean, and how to prepare. I want to start with a simple question of think of an interesting or important technology, one that is changing your life and work. We'll try to build a list of about 10 or so, but Mike, maybe you could stand up again. And there's a ton of stuff changing things across the street at the bank, but what are some of the technologies that are changing work for you?
Well, Tom, that's a wonderful question. In fact, there's so much technology change that we quite frankly can't keep up with it all the time. Sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose. But I think the most interesting thing going on in the banking business, and I think it's going on in many other businesses, is the whole advent of artificial intelligence and the kind of work that artificial intelligence can do at such a much faster, more effective, more efficient way than what a human being can do, quite frankly. So you think that would mean that we're going to need less people. Well, quite frankly, we don't need less people. We need more people to manage the whole way we do artificial intelligence and work with what we call bots. And so I think at the end of the day, it's giving us more access to pertinent data, and we can get it faster and more efficiently than we ever have in the past. And at the end of the day, that translates to providing better service for our clients throughout our entire footprint.
When you think about AI, there's obviously a lot of potential to get to know your customers better and provide better services. What are the things that we need to be worrying about and guarding against, particularly in banking and mortgage lending?
Things that we need to be guarding against.
Yeah. What's the downside to AI that we should think about?
Well, obviously, in a world of lots of big data, there are always security concerns. And the one thing that keeps our chairman and CEO awake at night is cybersecurity issues and how those can impact an entire organization. And then the ultimate impact that would have on associates, the ultimate impact that would have on clients. And that's the one thing we fear is a cybersecurity attack by a foreign entity or even a domestic entity that could cause tremendous havoc and disruption.
Good. Thanks. We'll come back to you. Jim, another member of the steering committee. Good morning.
Morning.
You have a heating and air conditioning, HVAC business?
We do.
Climate Solutions?
Yes.
What kind of technologies are changing your business?
Again, like Mike, it's metadata. Our clients want to know how efficient their system is and the environmental conditions and energy savings. And we used to have to collect that.
When's the first time you said metadata? You're an HVAC dude and you're talking metadata.
Mike taught me that term
So-
about 5 years ago. But now all that's real time. And it enables our technicians to get data real time to understand what the problem is with the client, and when we do a solution, the impact of that solution on their problem that they're trying to solve, whether it's energy savings or humidity control in a blood lab in a hospital, or temperature ranges in raw materials in a factory. And it, for the client, improves their ability to get their job done, to reduce their operating cost, and increase their quality.
Yeah.
And it makes our technicians much more efficient and able to do more for the client.
Jim, I think it's pretty crazy that I can go on my phone and change the temperature of my house in Phoenix,
That's right.
right? So we now have these remote controlled systems that you can climate control different parts of your house from anytime, anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And in one regard, there was a fear several years ago, well, that'll eliminate jobs.
Right.
We won't need technicians anymore. In fact, what we found is it makes our technicians more impactful. They're
Right.
able to use the skills and knowledge they have to do a better job, a faster job for our clients and get them even better conditions and performance.
All right. Thanks. I'm going to come back and talk about what it's like to work with you.
Thank you, Tom.
My colleague Janice is going to help me grab a half a dozen more comments, but I'd love an example of technology that's interesting or important that you think is changing life or work. Do you have an example?
Can you repeat the question?
Interesting or an important technology?
Something new in technology? Okay, well, I teach first graders, and this is the first year that we've been one-to-one Chromebooks. And so I think that's been a little bit scary and intimidating, not only for them, but also for me, in keeping up with what they know and what they don't know and figuring that out. So
It's interesting. This must be the first crop of first graders. We have some of them coming to school used to dealing with a digital assistant, right? The Hey Siri or Hey Google. Have you noticed that?
yes, a few of them refer to Alexa and Siri, and yeah, it's been interesting.
Right. So we're just at the very beginning of understanding what it's going to mean to raise kids that have digital assistants at home. All right, Janice, find a victim. I'm going to ask Kristen stand up and tell us what's. Kristen works at New Tech Network. So what kinds of new technology are you seeing at work or at home that are interesting?
So we're seeing students come to school in a totally immersive environment. They watch YouTube videos if they want to learn something. They don't go, ask a teacher. They go ask a peer. They go ask YouTube. They go ask that digital assistant.
Right.
So I was in a kindergarten classroom the other day, and I was watching a student with a book, and they were trying to turn it on with their hand, which is hilarious. It's like, no, sweetie, you turn the pages. But then they were having a problem with some words, and they went to their friend and they showed them the book, and they said, show me how to read this, and then they couldn't figure that out. So then they went on their device and they were like, hey Siri, tell me how to read this book, and it popped up the book and read them the book as they were tracking along with their little fingers. Now, I was a high school teacher, so that's just the sweetest thing to me when a kindergartner's learning to read, but it's a whole different world that they come to school in than what I had.
So resourcefulness there, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Janice. Is that working?
Still looking.
Pick a victim.
Okay, I'm gonna call on someone.
Hey, guys. interesting or important technology?
So I mean, I don't know what they've said is true, and we're one-to-one with MacBooks and iPads in our district. Just seeing them use the different tools, like in my classroom, GarageBand has been pretty transformative, so they can kind of record their own voice and have that, and we're doing a podcast, and they're uploading it to iTunes, and so that's something way down the road they can pass on generationally to grandkids even, you know, and having that kind of historical piece right there. So it's kind of interesting.
Good, thank you.
Hi, I work at USC, and a lot of our meetings now are online through Zoom or Skype, so that has changed a lot of how we work at the university.
Great, thank you. Anything else that you've read about that made you go, wow, that's different? Any new technology you've seen recently?
We're communicating through applications, GroupMe. You know, it'd be a group text message before, but now we're using GroupMe and WhatsApp to get our communications at our school among our faculty.
Good, thanks. Hi.
Hi. I don't think it's been said yet, but a lot of the things that are coming out with the AI in the ed tech industry is really progressive and fascinating, how we're training computers and teaching computers to be able to do things like grade and respond, and teaching machines. I know Google has some new technology out where you can actually simulate yourself and work with a lot of different AI, so I think that's really progressive and interesting.
Right, Jim talked about AI in banking, but we're beginning to see it behind the scenes in education. All right, one more. About South Carolina as a leader in manufacturing. We're seeing a lot of robotic process automation in manufacturing in South Carolina. What are you seeing?
So I teach STEAM to 4K through 5th graders. And I teach my students that new technology is not just things, but also ideas. So the idea of the arts transforming how they view things. So interpreting things through the arts has been huge as a new technology piece, something that all students are can access, and just using their creativity has been huge in how they view things. And complex, you know, so I've seen DNA be performed through dance, and students get it quicker than they would through a presentation on DNA, so it's pretty interesting.
Great. Thank you. That's a great list. So with Janice and my colleagues at Getting Smart, we've spent the last 3 years studying the future of work, and we've come up with a couple of conclusions that some of you pointed to. We noted that in my 40-year career in information technology, we programmed computers to follow a set of instructions, and now Jim, you talked about, or Mike talked about feeding big data sets to computers and allowing them to learn from the data. This idea of code that learns is really a fundamental shift. It might be the most important invention in human history. There's some people that actually think it could be a big problem, a big existential risk in both respects of its promise and its potential peril. We think artificial intelligence is really the most important factor that's going to influence the lives and livelihoods of young kids in school. We really think it's a driving force that signals that we're a couple years into a new era, a new innovation economy where there's a new set of skill priorities, and ultimately, as we discussed at the end, that project-based learning is going to make a lot of sense to help kids get ready. We started our study in 2016 with a simple Google search. We set an alert for artificial intelligence and another one for machine learning, and in 5 days we collected a list of 100 current applications of artificial intelligence. So this was really shocking to me that it by 2016 was so prevalent in every aspect of life, that every big organization, big company, and big and government was beginning to use machine learning to actively mine data and to begin to get smarter and deliver better services in media, recreation, transportation, agriculture, as some of you mentioned, in healthcare. So it's not science fiction. There's thousands of artificial intelligence applications in every aspect of life now. This is a picture of what we think is happening. AI is a 60-year-old term. The primary breakthroughs are happening today in machine learning, or in what Google calls deep learning. And it's really a combination of deep learning with all the computers and cameras and sensors that are out there that produce big data that feeds machine learning. And it's really that combination that's changing just about every sector out there. It's producing, with robotics, it's producing Industry 4.0. I have a couple BMWs that I think were made in South Carolina, and they benefit from robotic process automation. Sensors and cameras are producing automated, soon-to-be autonomous vehicles. And all the way down to the dotted line is distributed ledger and blockchain, which we think is going to be useful in a lot of industries. It's already tracking agricultural products. We think soon distributed ledger technology is going to be useful for student transcripts so that kids can earn credentials and transcripts in multiple places and have them in one central place, a really simple, portable learning record. So the combination of AI and big data is changing every industry. The World Economic Forum calls it the fourth industrial revolution. If you're a teacher and you want to learn more, weforum.org, or you can just Google WEF4IR for Fourth Industrial Revolution, and look for the podcast. They have 10 podcasts that explain the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's a terrific set of resources. But the WEF calls this the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and we're living through something interesting and important. We're all living through this augmented work at home and life, where we have smart machines that are helping us in ways that we're sometimes conscious of and sometimes not. One of the most interesting things about this world that we live in is that in the next 6 years or so, we're going to transition to 5G, even faster internet. And while we transition to 5G, another 4 billion people will join the internet. So by 2025 or 2026, there'll be 8 billion of us connected to fast internet. That really begins to change everything. We imagine that almost everyone on Earth having access to super high-speed internet. So that's going to ratchet up both the skills that are required, but also what's possible in terms of the contribution that each of us can make. We live and learn and work on a set of platforms. We didn't think much about this until Facebook started losing our data and being called in front of Congress. But now it's becoming much more evident that these big platforms are having an outsized influence on the economy and the lives that we live. They do deliver a lot of value. They scale super efficiently, and they allow us to contribute, they allow us to connect, but we're learning a lot more about the downsides of the platforms that we live with. If you want to learn more, there's a great book called Platform Revolution by Sangeet Chowdhury. So let's shift gears and talk about the implications of all this new technology. I want to start by doing a quick interview again. Let's start with Mike. What's it like to work for you?
You're asking the wrong person, Tom. You need to ask my associates.
So if you're a project manager at BB&T, What does a week look like?
Well, I've never been a project manager at BB&T, so I'm not sure what their week looks like. But you know, it's interesting as and I may segue to something different, but I think this fits. Is in the midst of all this technology and artificial intelligence and everything that Tom's been talking about, what I find at the end of the day, and you'll notice this on the profile of the South Carolina graduate, it's those soft skills.
Right.
You may know all the technology in the world, but if you can't be part of a team, if you can't collaborate, if you can't work with other people to come up with creative and innovative designs, if you don't communicate well, you're not going to be a good team member at the end of the day. So I think in a world full of much more technology, we're going to need much more of those soft skills to be apparent in our associates. And I think that's in Jim's industry, that's in schools, it's everywhere.
Do you organize work in projects? Is that a part of how you get work done?
Across, you know, BB&T, soon to be merged with, we're acquiring SunTrust. We're going to be the 5th largest bank in the country, $500 billion in assets. Our world's about to change dramatically, as you might imagine. So there's a lot of projects related to this merger of equals that's going on right now. But on a day in, day out, I mean, I've got a meeting today, later this afternoon, 4 of us, and it's a project that we're going to be working on,
right,
relative to doing prospecting for new clients for the bank. But we're going to do it in a project-based environment.
So let's just go down that rat hole for a second. So you might organize that as a project. So it might be time-bound. You have a specific set of goals.
Correct.
There's an identified team that you're working with.
Correct.
You make clear who's going to do what.
Correct.
By when.
Correct.
Then you execute, you follow up. But a lot of work is organized that way?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I don't care what we do anymore. We have to work in teams, and that means project-based kind of work, right, and kind of learning. And what I find is that my associates enjoy that more than me going to them and say, go get this done, or go implement this. Let's put together a group, right, a project group, to make sure that we're doing it the very best way that we can do it, with the skills we have as human beings and with the technology we have available to us.
I imagine that big merger is going to be a series of projects that turn in an integration plan that turns into a series of projects that...
I can't begin to imagine the number of projects that are going to come out of this, right, of trying to put 2 fairly large financial institutions together at the end of the day.
You talked about this earlier, but what kind of skills are important when you're trying to hire a new manager?
Again, I don't look so much to the technical skills, because quite frankly, we've got to teach them a lot of that as it relates to the financial services industry. What's most important to us, again, are those soft skills. Those are just harder to teach. And we need people who, quite frankly, if you've never read Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset, we try to hire people who have a growth mindset. As my chairman would say, you know, not everybody has a growth mindset. And doesn't mean you're a bad person if you don't have a growth mindset, but he says, you just can't work at BB&T if you don't have a growth mindset. So that's real critical, that we've got people who recognize that learning is going to be very continuous throughout their entire career. I'm in my 45th year in banking, and I'm still learning. In fact, the learning has really elevated dramatically in the last 5 years.
Great, thank you, Mike. Jim, what's it like to go to work for you?
It's great every day.
So you, I take it you're probably not going to the top engineering schools in the world. Who are you hiring, and what are you looking for?
We're hiring the students who may have struggled in your high schools.
Right.
And it's interesting. We've got about 100 HVAC commercial technicians in South Carolina and Georgia. And we hire the top students out of the HVAC programs at the technical colleges. And when I talk to our technicians, they tell me, well, I struggled in high school. And because I just didn't get it. I didn't know why I had to learn that stuff. But when they went to tech school and got their hands on HVAC systems and understand how that works, they blossomed. And students who were C students, some students who had dropped out of high school, once they found what they had a passion for and they saw its relevance to the real world, they found out they were very smart. And they are. These guys are brilliant. They solve complicated, complex problems working in teams every day. And I tell them, what you do is word problems every day. And they cringe because they hated word problems. I say, no, that's what you do. You show up, that chiller's not working. You've got to find out what data you need, what algebra formulas to run that data through to find out, locate where in that chiller cycle the problem is, use your technical knowledge to fix that, and then test the repair that you did. The only difference between the word problems in high school and what you're doing now is the word problem is not written down and the answer is not in the back of the book. You do it on your own. And that's what they do day in and day out, and they're brilliant at it. They work in teams. Everything's a project. It's pulling, I don't know this knowledge, but I know Joe does. And I call him on my cell and he walks me through that element of it. Everything's planned out. We do the project work that Mike talked about of setting goals and assigning responsibilities and tracking performance on a schedule and end on time and end on budget. And every person in the company works as a part of a team and they understand teamwork. If I could just, you're here talking about PBL. As we've taken our TransformSC tour bus around the state, and we take legislators and we take business leaders in to see what you're doing, we have never left a project-based learning environment where the business CEOs who were on that bus weren't blown away by the fact that the students were completely engaged because they were doing something that they understood the relevance to, how well they worked together in a team, how well they came up with creative solutions, how well they communicated, and the confidence they had. And those are the skill sets that everybody's working for. And every CEO says, I'd hire any one of these students because they know how to get things done and how to bring it in on time. So what you're doing with PBL is allow students like our technicians who struggle in high school because they just didn't fit to understand a relevant problem-solving environment where they learn all of those skills and become incredibly valuable employees for companies.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Give these guys a hand. When you have this kind of conversation in your community, I think it's a great opportunity to bring moms and dads up and interview them about the kind of work that they do. It'll inform the conversation that you're having at your school about what's happening. I want to give you a super quick run through 8 implications of this new economy. The first one is that things are happening so fast. Our brains tend to think in linear terms, like we think these things came out 10 years ago and we assume that there'll be about the same amount of change in the next 10 years. But we're living on this exponential curve, so we'll see as much change in the next 3 years as we saw in the last 10. So retraining our brains to think on an exponential curve. Number 2, thinking about delivering in teams. One remarkable thing, whether you're in a bank or installing HVAC, both of these gentlemen talked about the importance of delivering on teams. Every profession is now more complicated than the individual craftsman. My dad is a neurosurgeon, and he watched his 40-year career of neurosurgery becoming more and more complicated to the point that he had to deliver everything as part of a multifunctional team. This is Atul Gawande, who in his great book, Being Mortal, described that impact on a surgeon. Atul, by the way, is the CEO now of the Berkshire, Amazon, JP Morgan health startup that is trying to revolutionize healthcare. But whether you're an accountant or a real estate agent or a lawyer, it's likely that you're delivering your product or service as part of a multifunctional team. So teamwork is more important than ever. Ironically, more and more people are doing that while being a freelancer or participating in the gig economy. So you have this dichotomy of being a manager of one, of learning to take initiative, of learning to sell your work and deliver simultaneously. So the paradox of being on a team but often being self-employed. Every field is becoming more and more computational. Jim, you talked about HVAC and plugging these units in, looking at metadata trends. So this is when it comes to heating and cooling system. I had a 15-year-old friend that told me a couple months ago, Tom, I'm going to be a biologist. And I said, oh, that means you'll be a data scientist. And she said, no, I'm going to be a biologist. Every biologist today is a data scientist. So every field is becoming computational. Some of you may have seen the announcement last week that MIT reorganized for the first time in 50 years. They launched a new school, the Schwarzman School of Computing. And instead of another vertical, it's an infrastructure school. And this School of Computing is now available to every other school at MIT. And so whether you're studying sociology or psychology or public health, you'll be able to access the resources of the Schwarzman Computing School because every field is computational. So every subject that you want to study today, whether it's art history or human arteries, is computational. So it really comes down to helping young people think about the problem they want to solve, problem finding, thinking about where they can source data, original data, or partner to find data, to combine data sources, clean data sources, and aim smart tools at them. Our kids are going to experience more novelty and complexity, and not just the technology that we talked about, but here in South Carolina, they're going to experience more big storms. Where I'm from, kids are going to experience more smoky summers from the fires. We're just beginning to understand how the complex human systems that we've created are colliding in ways that we don't fully understand. So when you add the natural change and the technology change, I think we can predict that our kids are going to see a lot more change than I have over my life. The question that this raises for me is if we have schools that are full of routine and compliance and their lives are full of novelty and complexity, are we preparing them for what lies in front of them? All right, the good news and bad news on AI that Mike and Jim both talked about. The bad news is we're headed for a lot more job dislocation. Almost every job is being augmented where we're working with smart tools, and in the next 10 years we're going to start to see some job dislocation. It's hard to predict because it's going to vary by sector and by geography. What seems clear is that income inequality is going to continue to increase. That, I think, is a social issue that we're going to have to deal with in the next 20 years. And if people were angry in 2016 about income inequality, it's going to be worse in 2024, 2028. AI is rapidly accelerating not only progress in society, but the aggregation of wealth and benefit. So how we learn to share the benefits that are produced by AI might be the most critical issue of our time. I am excited about the potential of AI. We're going to solve many of the problems that we face today. We're going to solve a lot of the diseases that we face. We could solve many forms of cancer in the next 10 years. We will make huge contributions to climate change. We'll make transportation much more widely available and much, much safer. So we're going to produce untold benefits by harnessing the power of AI. And the exciting thing for you and your kids is that they can be involved in that while they're in high school. This is something that they don't have to wait 15 years for, that we can create schools that are alive with a sense of possibility, the potential to contribute to community today. There's a group called AI for All that is enrolling high school girls in problem solving and connecting them with computer scientists at leading universities. So I love this idea of engaging kids in problem finding, working on the local example of a global problem, getting them involved in wrangling big data sets, and getting, with the advice of computer scientists, aiming smart tools at big data sets to make a real contribution on a real problem today. It's that sense of possibility, that power of contribution that I would love to see South Carolina schools alive with. The last implication is that our communities are all going to face waves of complicated issues. So I'm worried about the civic infrastructure in America. I'm afraid that no community and no state has the infrastructure to deal with a number of issues that are headed our direction. I'm optimistic about America's cities because I think this is at the city level where we're going to figure things out, where we're going to learn to be pragmatic and work with each other to try solutions. But the point of this slide is when you think about AI, it's not enough to just add a coding class at your high school. Your social studies class is now an AI class. That's a place where we ought to be having a dialogue about what does the innovation economy mean? What does it mean that when I apply for a loan, that is being processed by a bot that may have a set of biases that may prevent me from getting a loan based on my family history? What if I go to prison? What if I go to court and that court system is using a sentencing guideline with a recommendation engine that has racial bias built into it, right? So we need to begin to have a dialogue about how AI is being used and the biases that it brings with it. It's as much a social studies issue as it is a technology issue. All right, last section, we're going to do a quick sprint on how to prepare. Let's do this. We've had an interesting conversation about what's happening in the world. I want to do this. Let's stop and have a quick table chat on what skills are going to be most important to prepare young people for the world that we just talked about. So spend 5 minutes on that. What skills are going to be most important to prepare? All right, let's capture a couple of headlines. This table had a super productive conversation. Give me a couple quick headlines of things that you talked about.
We talked about ethical considerations. You know, you can find a solution to a problem, but what's the impact? What's the social impact? What's the environmental impact on these decisions?
So thinking of sort of first order and second order implications of what happens. You talked about problem solving, right?
Just to build upon what was just said in terms of, yes, we were looking at problem solving, but problem solving beyond the most immediate solution. So when we were talking about the ethics, but also looking at the flexibility of those problems, of looking beyond what we've even considered before, of looking towards innovation. So there's different aspects of problem solving. While we can say problem solving is a really great skill, is the extension of that problem solving, the other skills that we were really looking at.
Thanks. All right, Janice.
So we were talking about, the advancement in AI can be a scary thing.
Right.
But what we have to do is make sure that we continue to work to grow the human element, the collaboration, the teamwork, those soft skills that were mentioned earlier, because those are things that ultimately drive the AI as well. So, using it as an aid to grow instead of something to kind of take over.
Yeah. It's interesting how we keep coming back to relationships, right? It's all about relationships. For almost all of us, we learn in relationships, we grow in community. That seems to keep coming back. Grab another one, Janice. Would you talk about, Kristen?
We talked about, and this is Jackie Martin's credit, learning how to learn, that students who know how to learn and know how to own their own learning and have that agency and are able to drive themselves into their learning and into finding personal relevance and passion in that work, that is a critical thing no matter what they do in their life, if they know how to learn.
Great. Yes.
Yeah, at our table, we kind of talked about the idea of big data, skills to be able to analyze data, and computational thinking as a major part of it, to be able to figure out how systems work and to have a systems mindset. That and all those pieces that are the underlying structure for AI are all critical skills.
Great. All right. Let me go a couple slides, and then we're gonna do a second pause and talk about strategies to build those skills. What Janice and I are excited about is that having conversations like this about what's happening and what does it mean and how do we help kids prepare, it works. The flip side is if you don't have this conversation, you'll never build support for the kind of change process that you're trying to build at your school. This is a great example. In El Paso was the worst case of test prep in America. This was a school system that was entirely focused on producing test scores. That caused a cheating scandal and an embezzlement scandal. The management team went to jail. The state of Texas took over the district 6 years ago, and the new superintendent launched a set of community conversations like the one that we're having about what's happening, what does it mean, how do we prepare, and the community built a beautiful portrait of a graduate that really has fueled one of the most important turnarounds in America, a turnaround really focused on active learning, one that values the whole child, one that promotes social emotional learning and project-based learning. So a great example of trusting the process and listening hard to the community. And we got great answers back, whether it was an affluent part of the community or an under-resourced neighborhood right on the border. You guys have a terrific profile of a graduate. Did you have anything to do with that? Stand up and tell me what's the brief history of the portrait.
Well, it's interesting. The SCASA, School Administrative Association, were planning for 2020 goals, and they came to the business community, the State Chamber of Commerce, and said, we keep hearing from business, we're not producing what you need. help us understand that. And we said, thank the Lord that you came to us and asked us to do that. So they invited us at the table, and we talked about soft skills. We said, we understand the importance of the knowledge that you need, but you also need to have creative problem solving, communication skills, working in teams, ethics, responsibility, showing up on time, and those kind of things. And collaboratively, we built the profile of the graduate from that, and it was adopted collaboratively with the employer community and the education community, and then a few years ago was adopted by the state legislature as our goal for all students.
So this is a terrific picture. Virginia's got a similar one. I want to just celebrate that stuff at the bottom. That's really a profound answer to the what do kids need to know and be able to do. Let's just stop and spend a couple minutes and think about what kinds of experiences are likely to produce those skills. So spend 5 minutes at your table talking about the specific experiences likely to produce those skills. Let's do the live version. All right. I'm going to start back here. Stand up. You have a great answer to this question. What kinds of learning experiences do kids need to produce those skills?
I think the number one thing is you have to provide students with the purpose, and students have to define the purpose for themselves. If they don't have the purpose behind their learning, if they don't have their why, then they're not going to get anything else. So they have to develop their why. And then through that, you have to give them the opportunity not only to face successes, but to fail, and to fail with celebrations, and to fail with feedback, and to fail with being given the initiative to still move forward, even though you didn't get where you were trying to get to.
Great. Thank you. All right, Janice, let me have you grab one. What did you guys talk about? What kind of experiences do kids need? Come on. I know you got a good answer for me.
No, hold on. What do we say? Sorry, hold on. What do we say?
What they already said. Right, we said the same thing.
What's that?
Growth mindset.
All right. What's a growth mindset experience look like?
Just being able to learn from their failures and actually apply themselves.
Do you get a growth mindset doing worksheets or what?
No, definitely not. Hands-on.
Like, give me an example of hands-on learning.
Well, PBL.
Okay.
But giving them a challenge to solve, this is really close.
Right.
We're not at a talking table. Just giving them challenges to solve where they're like using the content and skills in real life and not in this like a worksheet. That's what we always try to tell the staff at our school is to stop giving worksheets because they're not learning anything.
I love you guys. All right. Go ahead, Janice.
We got really deep into this conversation, so we almost forgot what the question was. But when we look at the profile of the graduate, we were talking about really these things need to be flipped. So what's at the bottom really should be at the top as the most important things. And we got off into a discussion about standards and who decides what kids need to learn anyway, and that's really going to change, we believe, in the future because information comes so rapidly, change comes so rapidly, that all of those skills at the bottom of the profile of the graduate really need to take precedence over the other things, even though there are some foundational things we know we all need to know. But we, in our world that we kind of dreamed of back here, students would be involved in real world problems and scenarios that they are solving. And all of those content things would be married together into that. Because when you are solving problems and doing real work, you are analyzing, you are gathering data, you are integrating the math, the communication, all of it. It all comes together at once. So we would like to see that in our utopia come to be.
Great. Thanks for all those answers. Transform South Carolina has a terrific answer to this question. It's I think a perfect 4-part answer. First answer is real-world project-based learning. Second one is anywhere, anytime personalized learning. So I think of these as sort of individual skill sprints that help kids engage in real-world learning at a high level. Finally, real-time information. I think about that as relationships plus data, sort of real-time guidance that a teacher, a parent, an advisor, and a student has real information about how they're doing. And then finally, students advance when they're ready. This is competency-based learning. Kids show what they know and they progress based on mastery. This is as good a 4-part answer to the what should learning look like as anybody has produced. So I love the work that's been done here. It summarizes it as well as I could in terms of the learner experience that kids need today. I want to sprint to the finish with just a quick look at project-based learning. I'm going to give you 6 quick examples of schools around the country that are doing what we call high-quality project-based learning. Last year, with our friends at the Buck Institute, we built this framework called HQ PBL that is the 6 elements of what high-quality project-based learning looks like for students. I want to note that it includes project management. We want to help kids get good at managing projects because, as Mike and Jim described, most of the work that they're going to do is in projects, so they should get expert at creating a project, at creating role clarity inside of projects and managing a project to a discrete finish. They should learn to collaborate. Projects should end in a public product. So if you want to learn more, look at HQ PBL. There's a lot of great case studies up there. Let's do a quick look at 6. The first is South Carolina has a group of schools that are members of the New Tech Network. We have some here? Yes? Yay, at least one. How many schools in the New Tech Network here in South Carolina?
11.
11.
Yes,
Awesome.
multiple districts.
So the schools in the New Tech Network share a commitment to integrated, team-taught, project-based learning. They share a platform called ECHO, and they assess in every project the communication, agency, and collaboration that students display during that project. So I'm heading out to visit one right after lunch if anybody wants to go. Number 2, Olin College. It was named in a recent study as the most well-regarded engineering school in the world. What I love about it is that from day one, in every class, students are doing real-world hands-on learning. When you go into a mechanics class, you get a pile of cardboard and rubber bands and they say, make jumping animals, go. When you go into the quant class, they give you a six-pack and styrofoam and they say, float these across the pool, go. So every class is a hands-on exercise, and by the time students are juniors and seniors, they're taking on real-world issues and delivering value for students. I had lunch with the president a couple weeks ago, and I posted a blog called How to Be Employable Forever. And I opened that blog with this quote from Rick Miller. He said, learning things that matter, in context, in teams, envisioning what has never been and doing whatever it takes to make that happen, do that 20 times and you'll be employable forever. So I love that idea because that's really what Olin College is. It's a school dedicated to hands-on project-based learning. Some of the projects at the beginning are very discrete, where it's a sprint to a known product. By the time students are juniors and seniors, some of them are much more design-focused and don't have anything close to a certain conclusion. So I love the mixture of projects at Olin. Albemarle in Charlottesville, Virginia is a terrific district that's alive with design challenges and projects from K to 12. We have a couple blogs and podcasts on our recent visits to Albemarle. Great multi-age spaces at the elementary age that if you're thinking about remodeling an elementary, it's worth the visit. The multi-age spaces give kids more voice and choice in terms of where and how they work, but it also allows skill groups to progress really easily and naturally, so students can move into different skill groups in reading, writing, and math, and then move right into a project group. On the West Coast, Design Tech High is one of our favorite high schools. This is a school that uses design thinking across the curriculum. Design thinking is just a structured problem-solving approach that helps kids walk into complexity with the confidence to know what to do first. Design thinking asks students to make sure that they understand the problem that they're addressing, then to begin empathy research with people that are also experiencing the problem, then to launch a set of iterative potential solutions. I love the fact that it's design thinking from beginning to end. Students start at Design High with Galen on the right, and ninth graders all take a prototyping class. So they learn a series of prototyping tools. The last time I brought 20 people from Kansas City to visit Design Tech in the fall, they were all sewing. They had 40 sewing machines out. The week before, they had been drawing up solutions, and then this week they were sewing the actual prototype solution. So they learned to use real tools, but not for the tools themselves, but as an act of prototyping of how to turn what's in their head into something physical that they can share with a real audience. And by the time students leave Design Tech High, they're doing real work for their community. Wayne on the left is a Purdue-trained engineer that leads a year-long engineering course that culminates in a public product. In Pittsburgh, one of the districts out by the airport is alive with computational thinking. It's a cousin to design thinking. The language is a little bit more from computer science, but it's a structured problem-solving approach that can be used to set up projects. It's used K-12 in South Fayette. This is a smart city project that kindergartners did, where each of the units had to fit together. Love the fact that kindergartners are thinking about cities that are sustainable and livable and workable. So it starts early in South Fayette. Right next door is the Montour School District. We feature them frequently on Getting Smart. They have a middle school AI ethics course. You talked about the importance of teaching ethics, and every student in Montour is learning about the ethics of AI and what they need to be on guard for. Place Schools is a new national network of rural micro schools that are connected to their communities. It was started by our friends at Eton Science School. It's built on a beautiful set of design principles that include design thinking and interdisciplinary project-based learning. I love the idea of very small communities getting their high schools back, having high schools that are really focused on the community, problems in the community, and getting kids engaged in the community, but doing it as part of a national network. Finally, I'd love each of you to think about what can we do in South to help more kids have access to high-quality project-based learning. If you're an administrator, host a conversation like this to build support for active learning and project-based learning. Give your teachers the time and support to engage in project-based learning. Give teachers time to build integrated team-taught lessons. If you're a business person, think about the way you can connect schools to your business. Think about internships. Some of our favorite schools in Albuquerque, ACE is a construction school, and Health Leadership. These are schools that actively solicit projects from their community, and community leaders give the schools ideas on projects, and then they create internships for kids. Maybe if you're a business leader, you can create that kind of a connection so that kids have real clients for the projects that they're doing. Become a project mentor. It's great if students have an expert that they can connect with around a project. And give critical feedback. I have found that in every case where I've seen teenagers doing really important work, it's because they received critical external feedback, but they received it in the context of a safe and supportive environment. So look for a way that you can get involved in project-based learning at school, and then finally host or attend an exhibition of learning. It's really important that students have a chance to share their learning with the broader world. I'm excited about creating schools that are alive with the sense of possibility, not just preparing kids for someday in the future, but engaging them in real problems in the community today and helping them feel the success of actually making a contribution to their local community. I think that's what today is really about, schools alive with that sense of possibility. I know you're here because you want to celebrate that possibility and learn more about it. Thanks for being here, and thanks for doing what you do. Here's where you can find more about us at Getting Smart. And Janice is a local, lives just a few minutes from here, and would be happy to follow up with any of you that are interested in learning more. Thanks.
Tom and Janice, thank you. You've given us much to think about. You've probably disturbed our comfort zones to some degree, but that's always a good thing. That's how your comfort zone grows, is when it gets disturbed. I also thought of something that great philosopher in the 1950s, who was a catcher for the New York Yankees, called Yogi Berra. He said the most interesting things, often profound. They weren't profound until maybe years later, but he said, "The future ain't what it used to be." And I think that's very profound for what we're going to be going through in the next decade. I think the learning and the change is not going to be linear. As Tom said, it's going to be exponential. So thank you for being here and participating in this.